Hi, welcome to my show. Today, my guest is Richard Rothrock. And Richard is someone that I had met years ago. I had attended a writers' conference,
Hmm.
and I was really impressed by his by the lecture, the talk that you gave. I even ended up writing a poem about it.
Okay, I don't know about the poem, but
Yes, but then later on, he ended up helping me with a script that I had written, doing some story consulting. So thank you, Richard, and thank you for coming here today.
thank you for having me.
I as an author yourself, you've written a very wonderful book called The Wonderful World of Disney, and that book is about your experience growing up with Walt Disney. So you're going to share a little bit about that.
Yes.
Yes. So tell me first, like, how did you get into writing, and what led you to write that book?
Writing is something I've wanted to do all my life. I was writing from when I was a kid. I was probably writing short stories when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I was writing, I like to joke that I wrote my first bad short story collection when I was 11, and I wrote my first bad screenplay when I was like 16. But I was writing all throughout my teenage years and everything, and I've never not wanted to be a writer. My mother always wanted me to have a fallback job, and I never could come up with one because I just wanted to write all the time. And so I've spent a lot of time doing that. I primarily spent my 20s and early 30s writing screenplays and having them shopped around Hollywood. And then this book kind of just came about. It was one of those happy coincidences. Sunday Nights with Walt. Everything I know I learned from The Wonderful World of Disney is kind of based on my childhood. Growing up, my parents moved around a lot when I was a kid, and back when we were kids, we were one of those old-fashioned, baby boomer families where mom had us eat at the dining room table every night, and she would let us do that 6 days a week. But for Sunday nights, we were allowed to eat in front of the TV. And it was called Pizza Night because she made pizza that night, and my dad made popcorn, and it was the only night of the week when we can have candy for dessert. It was the only night of the week we could have soda or pop to drink. And we would go downstairs and we would watch The Wonderful World of Disney. And the show was on at 7 o'clock on NBC for 30 years, roughly.
Really?
And 1954 to 1983. Mm-hmm. And I was watching it. We were watching it together as a family. And that was my first real exposure to the wider world. We grew up I spent most of my childhood in a little steel town called Weirton, West Virginia. You all probably know it because since I moved away, it's been used in the movies. It was part of the town used for The Deer Hunter, the steel town.
Wow,
And
I love
also
that film.
back in 2011, Super 8. Was filmed in Weirton. They gave it a different name. In fact, the kids are even going to school at my old elementary school in the movie.
Wow.
So I grew up with that, and the show just kind of taught me how to love nature and love the world and science and everything like that.
Well, first of all, based on how you described your home life was and your dinner table and the Sunday nights, I was like, I want to be in there. Is there a way, like Back to the Future kind of thing, where you can go back and invite your friends and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, sure, yeah. No, it was fun. It was,
it sounds like it was a lot of fun. And then second of all, the mentioning of where you lived and what films were done, I'm like, I want to visit his town, too.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because, of course, that all happened after I moved away. We moved away from Weirton when I was 12. And we moved to Charleston, the state capital, and then at the time, I never would have thought movies would come in and film in Weirton at all. But they did. There's been a couple of them done through the years.
And how long have you lived in Michigan? How long?
Oh, I've been in Michigan pretty much constantly since 1979 now.
Okay.
I have lived in other places, but for some reason, I keep coming back to Michigan.
Okay.
Mostly because my mom was here.
Okay.
My family did end up here with it.
So, with regards to the writing of that book, I had heard an interesting story of how you got it, how you entered.
It was really, it was strange. One of those, it was one of those, I guess this was meant to happen things, because I had been thinking about writing this book, and I had even sought out Theme Park Press, which is, if you're not familiar with Theme Park Press, they're the largest publisher of Disney books outside of Disney.
Oh, I didn't know
And yeah, and so they and I'd found them and looked them up on the website, and I thought this would be a good book for them, but I hadn't really done anything about it. And all they said was they wanted 3 paragraphs about what your book is. And there was one night, this was right before Thanksgiving of 2016, and I was sitting around. I had taught at the time. I was teaching part-time, and I had just gotten done from all day grading, and I was really tired. And grading can get very mentally exhausting. But I wanted to do something for myself, and I thought, well, I can throw 3 paragraphs together. So I threw together 3 paragraphs on what I wanted to do with the book, and I emailed it to them like they said to do. And I thought it was about 6 o'clock in the evening, and I thought, well, good. I did something for myself. Maybe I'll hear back from them in a couple weeks or a couple months, or maybe I'll never hear back from them. But at least I did this today, and I feel good about that. And I sat down. What was even funnier is my wife was out of town, so I fixed dinner, and I stuck in a biography of Walt Disney, of all things. And I'm sitting there eating dinner and doing all that, and 2 hours later, Theme Park Press emails me back saying, "Hi, we love it. We want to buy the book." And I was like, you do realize that all I have is 3 paragraphs right now. And they're like, oh, yeah, we understand. So we're like, so anyway, we did a little back and forth, and I signed the contract 2 days later. And I was like, okay, I'm writing a book. And I spent about a month of research, and then I spent a really furious 4 months of writing it. I wrote it in the mornings, and it was really a lot of fun because I now had a paid excuse to go watch all these old episodes of The Wonderful World of Disney. And if there are any fans out there of them, you can find a lot of them on YouTube and different websites and things. I'm sure a lot of them are now on Disney Plus. Now that Disney Plus has debuted. And so that's how I wrote it.
So I love this story because for many reasons. First of all, I like how you say that you wanted to do something for yourself, and then you submitted, and sometimes we underestimate as writers the importance and the value of submitting. It just seems like the rejections are more than the acceptance, which is true.
That is
but
very
at the
true.
end of the day, you would be surprised how something comes back to you. Whether in your case, how it happened within a couple of hours, or whether sometimes you submit something, you totally forgot about it, and then like 6 months later, this person is responding that, well, you submitted this, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be a part of this project that I totally forgot about. And wasn't
Yes,
even
exactly.
expecting.
Yes.
But it's part of the process for us as writers, isn't it? It's an
Yeah,
important part
totally.
of the process, right? Do you find, so I want to mention a little bit, because I'll start asking you things about writing, but I want to mention about your teaching experience,
Yes.
because you were teaching at Motion Picture Institute of Michigan for quite a while.
10 years, yeah.
10 years.
I was there from 2008 to just this fall.
Wow. Yeah. See, and so having you here and yourself being as such a veteran writer, some of the things that maybe writers fail to do is that next step. So aside from writing it, and you did kind of a background, it was like a backward thing. Okay, where it's like you put the idea out there, then they...
Oh, right, yeah. It's like usually, because a lot of people go, oh, don't query us unless you have the complete manuscript,
Yes.
and all this, and I didn't do any of that. It was just kind of one of those spontaneous things.
Yes.
The nice thing about it was they were, oh, yeah, take your time.
Yes. And sometimes that works that way because you suddenly have a deadline, and as writers, we kind of learn how to work with that.
Right.
Our creative energy changes based on that deadline, too, especially if we really want something.
Yeah, I found myself, not just with this project, but other projects, I work best by giving myself a self-imposed deadline. Because if I don't give myself a deadline of when something needs to be done, then I tend to, like most writers, I tend to procrastinate a little bit, or I get kind of hung up on things. And having that self-imposed deadline forces me to work through the problems that I see. So
And so what would you say, given your years of experience as a teacher, that what did you notice about, like, either aspiring writers or the students? What would be, maybe something that a lot of people need to learn to be better writers or to become successful in their field that maybe are not so aware of it,
The biggest thing I've noticed in teaching students, and even with all kinds, is that most people have a good idea. Most people, they want to write a screenplay or they want to write a book or a graphic novel or whatever, and they usually have a good idea. That's not the issue. What usually is the difference is the craft, how well they know how to tell a story and how to tell a story in a way that's going to connect with an audience. That's the thing that they're not quite up to speed about. And I used to tell my students on day one that there are two things you need to be successful as a writer. You need to have talent and you need to have craft. I can't teach talent. Talent is something that you already have imbued in you, but craft is what separates the beginning writer from the professional writer, and so if you can learn craft, then you can learn how to connect with your audience and go with there. And what separates the successful ones from the not quite successful ones is working hard to do that craft. And it's very hard. I mean, it takes years. You're a writer, and you know how long you worked at it.
Do you think that's what deters writers who are very talented from getting to the next step to become? It's because it is hard work.
It's because it's a lot of hard work. I used to tell the kids there are 4 stages to writing, and the first was wannabe, where you just kind of play around with it, and the second kind is imitation, where you spend a lot of time writing stories that are copies of your favorite thing. I know when I was a kid growing up, my favorite things were things like the Planet of the Apes movies and Star Trek and some old 1960s TV show called Lost in Space. And all of my stories I wrote as a kid were rip-offs of those. You know. I used to tell my kids that I wrote, one of my ideas that I had was Planet of the Cobras, where they had human bodies and cobra heads,
So that made it authentic, right?
Oh yeah, that made it authentic.
It made all the difference.
And that's like one of the worst ideas I've ever heard, and I came up with it. I always tell everybody, hey, it's all yours, take it, and they never have taken me up on it. And then the third stage is when you're trying to acquire your craft and your life experience, and you're trying to mold those things that have influenced you with your own original voice. And that's actually the hardest part. And that does take years. It took me years to really work on it. And a lot of people along the way get discouraged, or they don't have the right people along the way to encourage them, and they just kind of give up. But if you can hang on to there, then you achieve breakthrough. And breakthrough is when you've taken all those influences you've had, and it's come together with your own original voice and your craft, and now you're writing something that not only is good and professional, but it connects with an audience. And that's what you need to do. And most of the writers actually give up usually in that third segment, I found.
And also, like regards to breakthrough is different for different people. And I guess maybe not so much the breakthrough, but I guess after that, the success of what it means to be successful. So it's not necessarily matches up with what the industry might say is successful.
Correct.
But it's getting your work out there somehow. Right now, what is your viewpoint, especially in my opinion, given technology and the space available for independent, whether bookstores or independent authors, independent filmmakers, there's a lot more room.
There is a lot more room now. Yeah, there is. It's kind of weird. It has changed. When growing up, and then for most of my adult life, and yours as well, I'm sure, the problem was access. It was getting access to the publishers. It was getting access to the studios if you were in Hollywood, or the companies. And now the access doesn't matter. You can go out there and pull out your cell phone and make a really good movie for a couple $1,000s, which didn't used to be the case. And you can go out and you can create a book and you can self-publish it. And it looks professional. It looks as good as any book you'd see in a bookstore. But then the problem then is, how do you call attention to it? How do you publicize it? You can have a movie, that's up there on YouTube or Vimeo or whatever, but then how do you get people to see it? There is so much content now, and it has really exploded, especially in TV. TV has exploded in the last 5 years. It's going to explode all over the place in the next year with Disney Plus and Apple TV and HBO Now and now everybody's doing these streaming platforms. There are so many TV shows now. How do you get people to come and read your book? How do you get people to watch your movie? And that's sort of a new skill that we all have to learn now.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, because as an independent, the plus side is that you don't have to wait for somebody else's permission to take it forward. But what I always like to tell writers, anyway, whatever work that you do, I think quality still matters. Storytelling still matters. So just because you can pick up something and then just put it out there, don't just get tempted just to do that carelessly. Care about the art of it. Care about the story, whether it's a book or whether it's a film. You still have to care about what you're putting out there.
Yeah.
And that will help in you understanding how to publicize it. That at least it's something that you can be proud of, so that even if it doesn't reach a large audience, but it might get recognition from a few film festivals.
Right.
There's something, people recognize good work. That's what I have noticed. And people recognize bad work.
Yes, they do. Yes.
So to me, I feel like quality is important. And this is what I remember you by the way. So you were giving a talk about how, your work, you noticed that sometimes in the Hollywood industry, they were encouraging people, don't have a message.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Don't have a message in this. People just want to be entertained. The reason that touched me is because at that time you were thinking, like what's so wrong about having a message? Like what's so wrong about having quality work that means something? But that was, I can say, I believe it was over 10 years ago that I saw you.
Yeah, it was, yes.
It was? Okay. I believe that's changed. How do you feel about that?
I actually don't think it's changed at all.
You don't think so?
I don't. I mean, they still will tell you that, because they associate message with boring, and like you're trying to lecture us on it, and I don't think that's true. I think every movie has a message. It's just how obvious. It's just how obvious it is. I mean, they'll tell you don't have a message. Just entertain. Don't just worry about entertaining people. But there's a message. I mean, Avengers has a message. The superhero movies have a message. The art house movie that you love down at the main art theater in Royal Oak or wherever you're going, they all have messages. Movies have messages. That's how they get meanings.
Well, but also, don't you feel that they have there's people that have an interest in that because the way the documentaries right now are on the rise, memoir, even, like your book. Your book it's from your experience. You're not writing about Walt Disney.
Right.
Your experience of that somebody responded within 2 hours, but it was you were going to talk about that, but based on your experience growing up with it. So it seems like from the documentaries and the interest in memoirs that people maybe really kind of want that deep down, that they want more of something that's meaningful.
Yeah, I agree. I think
like real people or real messages or.
What we want in our entertainment, whether we like it or not, we want to be entertained, obviously.
Yes.
But we also want to learn something new, and I think that's where we get it. And then also, and I used to tell my students this, and I try to stick it in all my work as well, we want to remember something we forgot. We want to remember a memory or a moment when somebody reached out to us, and it was something we used to do. Or something we didn't remember. My example I always cite, and it's probably an obscure example now, but there's an Oscar-winning 1980 movie called Ordinary People, directed by Robert Redford, and it's about Conrad is a teenage boy who has attempted suicide, and he's back home because he and his family have not gotten over the unexpected death of his older brother, and he meets a girl at school, and he's really interested in asking her out. And he goes home, and he's all set to ask her out. He's got his telephone. This is the pre-internet, pre-cell phone. It's the old-fashioned phone. And he picks it up to call her, and he freezes, and he hangs up. And then he spends the next couple of minutes practicing and rehearsing what he's going to say to her. And when that moment happened, when I saw that movie back in 1980, I went, oh, my gosh, that's what I did. The first time I was going to try and ask a girl out, I did the exact same thing. And I didn't know anybody had ever done that before until I saw that on screen. And when we have moments like that, it helps us, I think, feel more connected.
Yes.
to human beings and the larger world. And so we try and stick those kinds of things in. And there have been moments like that in stuff I've written and all that, and people will come up to me and say, oh, that happened to me too, and I didn't know that. I think that's part of what we're trying to do.
Yes, and that's the beautiful part of storytelling and telling a story well, because no matter what your background, if there's scenes that connect you to the character, there's the depth of the story helps. Like, I don't know if you know this, a lot of people, I've talked about this before, that the first novel I ever read, I was 9 years old, was Gone with the Wind in Arabic.
Oh,
we
wow.
were in Jordan waiting, we had left Baghdad, and we were waiting for our visa to come to the United States, and there was a copy of Gone with the Wind, and we couldn't register in school at that time and stuff, because we weren't residents of there yet. So anyway, I read Gone with the Wind and loved it. So here's this 9-year-old girl sensing that, Scarlett's world felt like felt similar. It was like tribal, and there was something about it that I didn't even realize, like, that we're so different,
Right.
that our backgrounds were so different. And I was expecting to come to the United States and see horse carriage and puffy dresses and stuff like that. I mean, that was the only, that was the culture
about 100
shock.
years too late,
right?
but yeah.
Yes. But my image was that. But the nice thing is I did feel that connection that, this is, I can relate to this young woman that, and I imagined that this is what it was like. And it was the first film I went to see in a movie theater, also in Jordan, and it was subtitled in Arabic. And so to me, that connection, what it did is it empowered me to feel that even though I was this, from a different culture, but it kind of gave me an idea of a culture that I can connect with, even though it wasn't even part of mine. It was it was an introduction to America. So by the time I came, even though on a physical level it looked different, that's what I had a connection with, and it kind of gave me like an idea of where I can go with who I want to be,
Right.
So storytelling does matter. And then because there wasn't a lot of material about the Middle Eastern backgrounds, so I would connect to movies that were of different cultures but felt close to mine.
Okay.
Like, like Al Pacino's Godfather, there was certain stories, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. So they're called, they have, and I thought, we're so much more alike than when we're not. And I give a lot of credit to filmmakers that make an authentic story, because people of different backgrounds, of minority backgrounds that don't see themselves, that they at least see themselves in those stories. And then they feel, wow, we're really not that much different than others. Yeah.
One of my favorite moments out of teaching was we used to have a lot of international students at MPI. And one year we had a exchange student from India. And he had just arrived, and we were starting at the end of the first night of classes, and he comes up to me and he says, do you mind if I talk to you for a little bit? And I was like, no problem. And so we sat down in the lobby, and he spent about 45 minutes just asking me all kinds of questions about America and what do you do and how does this go and whatever. And when we got down to the end of it, I always remember, I said, well, did you learn anything? Will this help? And he goes, yes, I learned that the United States is just like India.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was like, yeah, I guess so. I've never been to India, but apparently.
And now you know that India is just like the U.S., right?
Yeah. So if I ever go to India, which I hope to do, actually, it's on my bucket list.
Me too. I just interviewed somebody from India that I just told them that. So maybe we'll end up on the same year or something going there.
Maybe so.
Spiritual journey. And to bring up another topic, when you were saying about MPI, community is important too. I always believe community, having a community of writers. We know this as, Utah MPI. I went to MPI and I created, there's been really great people from that school that have helped me out, who recently I learned, I connected with somebody that helped me do editing because of MPI introduced me to them. I called them about finding a story consultant for my story Pomegranate, and they sent me to you.
Yes, yeah, I got recommended.
And that was great. So it is important also to have, and we're both, like right now, because I'm ambassador for the Authors Guild, so I haven't been with the DWW, Detroit Working Writers, but we also were part of that together as well. So just maybe a little bit about that regarding community as writers.
I think it's very important to have community. And in fact, I think, wanting to be a writer or wanting to be a filmmaker, it's hard. And it's also an activity that you spend a lot of time by yourself. I mean, no matter what we do, no matter what technologies we invent, we still write by ourselves. And we still largely make movies writing them or preparing them by ourselves. And if you have a community to fall back on, that makes all the difference. I always tell students that, get yourself into a writer's group. Go find some similar people that you can like share your writing with and get feedback and whatever. And the support system is very, very important. It's the same thing with filmmakers, at MPI.
Yes.
A lot of the ones who end up being the most successful are the ones who are able to find like-minded people. It's really great. I mean, my son, who is also a filmmaker and also an MPI graduate, he spent a lot of his high school years feeling kind of lonely because he couldn't find anybody who was into movies or writing or anything. And I hear that a lot when people arrive at MPI. It's like, oh my gosh, these other people interested in what I want to do.
Yes.
And I think that helps you.
It helps.
Boost you up the ladder.
And sometimes it doesn't even have to happen. The connection doesn't have to happen not right away. Like in my case, I was at that time, literally while I was in the school, I was getting married and starting a family, and so the connection wasn't, but then there were a couple of people that were very supportive, and the contact stayed, and it's like 10 years later and I'm working with these people, so sometimes, it doesn't have to happen right away, but it's just important to have some kind of connection. And I just want to ask you, are you available, like I know you work with My Story and you did a really great job, but are you still available for story consulting?
Oh, very much so.
I know you have a website and people can contact
I've got a
you.
website, people can contact me.
You have your information on there. And I'm gonna post this after it airs. I'm gonna post it on my web blog, and then I'm gonna just put all your contact information where they can contact you as well.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in fact, I consulted on a script yesterday, and when I go home, I'm going to be doing another consultation.
Well, and you're going to be doing consulting for me about
yes, and you as well. Yes, you're on my schedule.
Okay,
Don't worry.
Okay. And I got to say this before the end of the interview because we're getting toward the end. You look so much like Roger Ebert. And that's a compliment.
It's a compliment, actually. I loved
Roger
Roger Ebert too.
And he has such a strong personality, and his views on film.
I'm very flattered. I'm blushing a little bit if you can't tell. I have to be honest with you. I don't see the connection at all. I mean, I've looked at myself in the mirror through the years and I was like, no, I just really. Anyway, but
really?
So many people tell me it.
And your sweater and everything is just
that's
perfect.
probably it. I like sweaters. Yeah.
Everything just looks the whole look. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on my show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, for anybody, here's the book again is Sunday Nights with Walt, and I know that you are also working on some other things, and so I'm hoping to interview you soon when these things get rolling, because I'm sure they're going to be a success.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Okay, till next time.
Yep.